This is unofficially called the wine hustle, and I don't know why we called it that.
It's a
But
grind.
the wine grind.
Yeah, exactly. It's a grind. It's a hustle. Totally.
We can change the name. So I guess we'll just start. Let's just dive in. Introduce yourself to all of our listeners. Our listeners are two people, me and Marcel. So introduce yourselves to me and Marcel.
Hey,
and
Marcel,
then,
how's it going?
Yeah. You were not in the wine business, and then you were in the wine business. Can you just tell us who you are, and then talk us through that journey? Because I don't even think I fully know this story.
We've talked about it, but over wine, so all good.
Okay, yeah. And you guys bring such good wine. You're like some of our only friends that bring really good wine, and so I don't recall.
It's all good. So I'm Sarah Lyons. So how did this all start? I moved to LA in 1998, and at that time I got here, I met some people that were like, yeah, we're going to a wine tasting. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come. But I was, super young. I was in my early 20s at the time. And I, had not really drinking that much wine at that point, a little bit, but, wasn't like super into it. Anyway, and the tastings were super interesting. I'm like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. I'd like to go to more. So I would go to more. I'd ask questions. I'd learn more. And it just kind of kept snowballing. And so then I found out about the WSET classes. And so I was like, oh, I'll take the intro. And so I took the intro. It was super fascinating. I'm like, okay, great. I'll take the next level. That's nice. I'll take the next level. And I just kept doing that because I was interested in it until fast forward, I eventually did the diploma. So I ended up going all the way through these classes and finishing up my diploma for WSET because I was just so interested. And then earlier in that journey, I met my to-be husband, but we dated for many years before we got married. And he his career also was not in anything to do with wine. He was in visual effects. His dad was actually in the wine industry, and his dad was a vineyard manager and had been vineyard manager at Ravenswood during kind of their heyday, and then had moved to North Carolina to plant vineyards for up and coming wineries in North Carolina. So he kind of came from a little bit of a wine background, but was not in that profession anyway. So anyway, point being, he had an interest in wine. And so then we just started going places to taste wine and learn together. And how the vineyard happened was we kept going up to Santa Barbara and, literally
because it's like your local wine community from LA.
That's right. Yeah. It's only an hour and 50 minutes from LA, from where we were in LA. And so we would go up there often, at least once a month. And we kept staying at different hotels or, staying at different Airbnbs. And finally we're like, God, we're coming up here so much. Maybe we should look at just getting a house up here so that we could stop spending money at other people's places and then we could rent it out when we're not here. So it's just a fancy kind of an idea in our head. And then we also simultaneously at some point we wanted to do something with his dad in terms of getting a vineyard or doing something in the wine business with my husband's dad. And then my husband's dad got sick with lung cancer and passed away from the cancer. And so point being, that dream unfortunately was not ever able to be realized. Yeah. So then we went back up to Santa Barbara County again for my 40th birthday. And on that trip, we were trying to get an Airbnb for rent for a bunch of people to stay. And I was having a significant issue getting one. The occupancy was all full. And I was like, then that means this actually might be a viable business to get a house. Mm-hmm. So that was the trigger to really house hunt up there. And as we were house hunting, it just kind of snowballed. We're like, well, maybe we should get something with a little bit of land. And then we're like, well, maybe we should look for something that has enough acreage we could plant some grapes one day. And then this property came up for sale that already had 2 acres of vines planted. And of course it was out of our price range. But we're like, oh, we have to go look at it. And so we went to go look at it and we're like, oh, we fell in love. And we have a son. At the time he was maybe 3 or 4 years old. I can't remember exactly, but young. But we got there and it's even this little toddler boy totally fell in love with the property. We went to go leave after looking at it and we're like, okay, Wilder, we're going to go now. And he's like, what? I don't want to go. I love it here. It's I thought we were going to stay. And it's oh my God. So he even fell in love with it. So then we figured out how to make it happen. And so that was just
it's your son's fault is what this is all coming down to.
It is. It totally is. Yeah. And so it was a huge thing to bite off at the time, just generally in terms of trying to find the money and, fund it and then, start up the process of of taking care of the vineyard that was there and then planning to plant more. We can talk about that a little in a moment, but it was like just really scary in the beginning to jump into. But, it'd been something we'd kind of been like burgeoning like all those years and never really like realized we could actually do it at some point.
Yeah, actually, I know. So this is all coming back to me after the many, the many nights of drinking Burgundy. So you have this vision when you start this, and I'm saying this also from me. Like when Peter and I planted a vineyard, we had a vision about how things were going to go. So I guess really what I'm interested in to start, what was your vision, and was that vision realized the way that you planned it, and how was that changed over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're usually really good about creating a vision and then working our way towards that vision. And so I'd say certain things have followed along that path and are kind of on track, and then other things are totally wildly different or off track. So first and foremost, given the area that it's in, which is Los Olivos district in Santa Ynez Valley, that area of the valley is really, we think, best for growing Rhone varietals. We did a soil test, and that also kind of rang true with regard to the soil test. And the existing two sets of grapes that were on the property, we had 2 acres, one of each, was Grenache and Viognier, also Rhone varietals. So from the beginning, we were like, okay, great. We're in the sweet spot. We're going to lean into Rhone. The vision was we're going to plant as much of this property as we can plant as soon as possible, because that's the other thing about a vineyard business, and you know this well. From the moment you even decide you want to plant a vineyard, it's going to be many, many years before you have a bottle of wine. Like the moment you decide, then you first start doing all the tests. What's the soil like? What's my water like? What's the pH of the soil and the water? Is my well viable? Like all those things take a very long time to do. Then you have to prep the soil. Then you have to, do any sort of amendments that might be needed, and all of that process probably takes almost a year, just generally just like getting ready. Mm-hmm. And then you have to put in your order with a nursery for the particular vines you want, whether it's the varietal, or even we were looking for specific clones. And so placing
which
order,
they may or may not have at any given time.
Totally. So you have to hunt around and make sure you find the right one that could get them for you, and they might not have what you want. And then once you place your order, then they have to do their bench grafting of taking the Vitis vinifera, putting it on rootstock, because you want to pick the rootstock that's right for your soil. And so they have to go do that, and then that has to grow in the nursery for a year until it's ready. And then what happened to us is some of them did, in the nursery, enough didn't take. So then they had to take another year to redo it. And then you finally get the vines, you plant them, and then they need 3 or more years in the ground before you can even make wine off of them. So we're talking, this is a 6-year process from the moment you even think you want to plant a vineyard until you're harvesting grapes, 6 years. And all that time you're shelling out money for all of that work to prep. You're shelling out money for the vineyard workers to care for the vineyard, et cetera. And you don't even have anything that's coming off of that. That we knew, because obviously we had been educated in it, but living it was
when the bills start coming in, it's no joke.
It's no joke. No joke. Yeah. Totally.
What was your average cost just before you guys were waiting for fruit? If you don't, by the way, if you don't want to share these numbers, I totally understand. But what was your cost per acre farming? Ours has gone up so exponentially in 10 years. I'm assuming your costs have gone up too. Yes. When you guys started, was it manageable?
It was manageable when we started, kind of manageable, only because there was only 2 acres of fully productive vines that need more care. The other work was staggered over the years of planting and then training and trellising and all of that the costs were spread out more, and there just isn't as much work on a baby vine that's growing. Now that it's all grown in and costs have gone up, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. I want to say it's I don't know, $20,000 an acre a year.
Sarah, that's what it's costing us somewhere $22,000 an acre. And it's much, I feel like it's Santa Rita Hills, because we have to spray more than you guys do. That seems really high. And you're charging us, because I had to look back at this, $3,200 a ton for Grenache. You have to raise that price.
It's crazy to me, because a place
You
like
can't make money on
Napa,
that.
no, there's like, it is not profitable. Like we're losing money every year. Like we're just literally paying money and not making anything back. And when we started that equation was just generally like we mathed it out. Like we did the, projections, and we weren't going to make a lot of money, but we were going to break even at least when we first projected it out. And costs have just gone up so significantly since then. But then also, like, we just, in Santa Barbara County, it baffles me so much that we just don't command or can't get the price per tonnage that a Napa could get. And I think it's just because Napa has just this cachet that's been now built up over the course of decades, that for some reason they can charge literally $10,000 a ton, even more for some wineries. And like in Santa Barbara County, that's just unheard of. So I don't know. Hopefully at some at some point that changes. But
I know.
yeah.
I'm hoping a little bit that, that farming costs, I don't know, get reduced. What's happening for us is that at the Joy Fantastic is, this is, we have Pierce's disease. So our costs are going up every year, but our yields are going down. Whatever this equation is right here, it's really bad. Totally. And so you're getting less fruit, but you're paying more for it. And I feel like, our labor costs, we started, and not that this is great, by the way. I think, when we planted in 2014, we were paying about $12 to $15 an hour for labor. And now we're anywhere from $22 to $25 an hour.
Same.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know how you feel about that, but it's kind of like, I know that people need to make a living wage. Like I absolutely recognize that. Like we can't raise our prices to meet that labor cost.
That's the difference, I think, is that everyone's paying more for labor now, but grape prices have not been able to be raised. Wine prices, consumers are actually expecting lower prices nowadays than they ever were, especially a younger consumer that we're trying to attract to continue to actually have our industry be viable. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, it's just, the equation is so lopsided, and really it's only the larger like companies that own multiple vineyards around the world that just have enough volume that they can like manage through that. But any small like individual winemaker, there is just no way to make money in this business. And so, it ends up just being a business of passion and love, and you do it because it fuels you. It's certainly not the best way to invest your money.
It's not, but after like over a period of time, like the idea, because that passion can pay your mortgage. It just, it doesn't. And because people come in all the time to the tasting room and they're like, well, you're doing what you love. Sure. But to not be making money on that, it can be a little discouraging and depressing.
Yeah.
It can be a lot discouraging and depressing.
Totally. And that's the thing, is like, anytime you hit a bump in the road in terms of your plans, and like you were talking about your vision, getting yourself motivated and like getting that passion back to get yourself over that bump in the road is so much harder, because that there's just not as much feasibility, I guess, in the long run, because of because the business dynamics are so difficult. So it's like hard sometimes to stay on track, and like, okay, I've got to get up my energy to go focus on replacing our well when it totally crapped out and we had to completely drill and dig a new well. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, really?
Let me ask you this. Do you think, just in terms of unexpected costs and challenges, that the well was number one?
Yeah. It was just a big one all at once. Cause like the whole new well was, I don't know, $60,000, $70,000 at the end of the day.
This is unbelievable. Yeah, it's
unbelievable. And then time to wait for the permits, which takes forever because they're not giving out well permits as often anymore. And so, yeah, so that was probably...
Wait, but you already had a well. So they wouldn't just like... So you already had a well, and they wouldn't just give you a permit to replace an existing well?
Well, yeah, it had to still go through process. At least I don't think they would have denied us, but like it still had to go through the process.
Wow. So you had to get like the county to sign off on it. You couldn't just replace it. It had to be like I guess up to code. I don't know. You'll have to educate me on
or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. Okay.
Totally.
Oh my God. So just
the
in
biggest
this
cost surprise.
Okay.
I guess. Yeah.
Any other like major like something that you just didn't expect when you went in? I will tell you, like the Pierce's disease thing has just been such a shock, because it was something where I thought no matter what happens in the vineyard, our yields might be reduced, but we'll be able to make it. And we're looking at right now that the vineyard, we're going to give it one more year. If it doesn't start producing a little bit more, we're going to have to walk away. We're not going to have any other choice. Oh, so is there anything other than the well, like something that sort of happened in the vineyard that shocked you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as we were planting vines, you always expect some percentage not to take when you're planting new vines. Yeah. And so for the most part, we actually had been in line with what you'd project, call it 10%, 12% that don't take. But we had, this was actually fairly recently over the course of the last 2 years, I guess. We had a clone that we specifically procured because I really wanted Syrah 174, and I finally found it at a nursery, procured it, we planted it. It was supposed to be virus free, and as it grew and got bigger, lo and behold, it was virused, and so we literally ripped it out year before last. And that just, and so that was probably 3-ish rows. Our rows are very long. So it was like a significant portion of just, wasted time, wasted money, wasted vine. Yeah. But I was like, rip that out now. I'm like, I don't want that spreading to anything else. We're ripping it out.
and like, just like you said, just like you opened with, like, there is no time to waste. Right. If you're going to replant, you have to start now. And just, I guess when we put our vines in, they were about $3 a vine grafted. Do you know what you were paying per vine about and how many vines you had to rip out?
Yeah, it's probably about that, between 3 and 5, somewhere around there. Maybe more towards 5 now. And it probably would have been about, our vines are fairly densely planted, so call it maybe 1,000 vines, 1,500 vines, something like that. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where you're just like, well, that's $5,000 you should have just burned in cash.
Totally.
I mean, what was the point otherwise?
Could have gone to Vegas,
Yeah, you could have had a really nice vacation. You could have done something, but instead you just planted a bunch of vines and then pulled them out of the ground. And it is that wasted time between realizing that they're virused. And what's really unfortunate is that it's not like you call the nursery and say, these vines are virus, you have to take them back.
They won't do a thing. They're like, not on us, even though they proclaim that it's virus free.
Virus free, yeah. And that's the whole reason why you buy from a nursery now and you don't just like take budwood from your friends. Right. Is that the idea is that you want it to be virus free, but it turns out sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
It's not always true. Yeah.
Yeah. So given all of this, and like, it's like hardship, it's heartache too. This is like your thing, because you have a job in the entertainment business, both you and Sky. Mm-hmm. And so everybody, all of your friends must look at you, because I get this too, and be like, oh my God, you guys are living the dream. You planted a vineyard. You have this house in San Ynez. Everybody wants to have a house in San Ynez. Certainly prices, like it's hard to buy a house up here anymore. We both got really lucky.
We got lucky. Oh my God.
But hindsight's 2020. You go back and you change one thing. What is it?
So I actually think we should have started making some of our own wine sooner. Mm. So just now we're starting to make our own wine and have a label we're burgeoning, and we can talk about, oh my God, the waiting process for getting the permitting to actually be able to sell it. But we probably should have started that sooner, because we could have realized there is absolutely no money, no margin in vineyard. In fact, it's a losing proposition. And if there's any chance of us even breaking even, we have to start to make our own wine. But the harder part, actually sell our own wine in order to break even on this thing. And the part of building up your clientele, building up your wine list, building up your club, and selling enough to get to the point of profitability takes a long time. And we're now entering a cycle of our industry where we have a lot of headwinds and, forces against us, whether that's baby boomers aging out of drinking wine, whether that's, new reports coming out from random associations about the health effects of wine, despite counter reports that it's healthy for you. Like, all of this stuff is like just going to make it much more difficult. And it's a very saturated business now. Point being, like, we should have started earlier to get our momentum built up earlier. But it's such a scary proposition to bite off that when you're also biting off the vineyard, because there's just so much to learn. And yeah, part of like we have to have our day jobs in order to fund all this. But to
Right,
your
right.
yeah, to your earlier question, yes, like it's every time I talk to someone in our industry, in the entertainment industry, or in business that I deal with outside of the wine business, they're like, "Oh my God, that's so amazing and so romantic and blah blah blah," and I'm so envious of you guys. And I always tell them, I'm like, it is not the best way to invest your money. I'm like, don't think that this is like the way to retire, because it's not. I try to like gently educate them, but on the flip side,
Right.
right? Yeah. But on the flip side, one of the things that actually helped feed into our business plan and part of our point of view that we're working towards when we launch our label is that we want to make our wine for people like this that I deal with and work with on a day-to-day basis in the entertainment industry. Because I understand where they are in their life cycle. I understand their point of view. I understand their level of knowledge or engagement with wine and how I can make wine more approachable or easier for them, whether it's easier to like feel good and confident about ordering something at a restaurant when they're at a business dinner, or whether it's easier
Mm-hmm.
for them to have their home stocked where they can bring a bottle of wine to a friend's house, have them have the cachet or the feel of being able to talk about it in the office. Like all those things are kind of important to people in the entertainment and business industry, but they don't really know how to jump to it to get there. And so I've had so many conversations with people just on a day-to-day basis when they find out about our vineyard, where I really have a lot of insight into how we can launch our brand and talk about our wine and position it to them in a way that I think will resonate with them. So at least all of that's kind of contributed to our business plan for the label. But yeah.
I hope you're collecting email addresses for your
I am.
mailing
Oh my
list
God,
as you're going
100%.
along.
Yes.
It's so
100%.
weird that one of the most important things to become profitable, because one of the things we were going to talk about is when did you become profitable, but I don't think we're there yet, so I won't force you. Peter and I didn't become profitable for 17 years, so it was a really long time, and now we are back at the at the point where, just like I was saying, it's because our sales are actually stable. Everyone is like panicking about Gen Z and millennials. I don't think it's as bad as everyone thinks that it is, but the problem is our costs are going up, but we're not able to raise the price of our wines, right? We already talked about this a bit, to kind of meet those costs. So sales are stable, but costs are going up. So, that's where it's like we were profitable and then suddenly we're not again. And it's like, oh, fuck. Like, are we back to where we were 3 years ago? Like, do you know what I mean? Like we were on the up and up and we were making money and there was money in the bank account, and then suddenly there isn't anymore, and it starts to feel a little like you start to get deflated.
Totally.
But like you, in the tasting room, what I don't want to do is that sense of romance is real with people. I mean, they've seen it in movies, and they want to think that Peter and I are like, I don't know, making love under the vines and having this
Do
time
like
of our lives.
picnics and yeah.
Meanwhile,
Exactly.
we're in like spreadsheets all weekend, like, oh, how do we yada yada. But you still, like, because it's your winery, you want to give people a sense of romance around it, and it sounds like you're able to do that. You're able to balance that. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, because you do. I mean, you do, and if you do step back, it does have like a positive aura around it, right? At least,
Yeah.
like you're creating something that you're putting out into the world that people are using in special moments in their life. Something that actually gives people like texture to what they're doing. It spurs conversation. They have memories that are created as a result of it, and so at least it's like a positive outcome. And so just kind of harnessing that as you're talking to people helps kind of get you over the day-to-day grind they have to work through.
I'm really glad you said that, because I have to remind myself of this sometimes, that what we're doing is we're kind of in the memory creating business a little
Yeah.
bit. People are sitting down at their table over Thanksgiving and drinking your wine. Like,
Totally.
what an honor. Like, we should be so honored that someone sits down and takes a bottle of our wine to taste with their family. Like, how lucky are we to have
Totally.
that
So
shared?
lucky. Like you're a part of like their most important moments in their life. Like that's really cool, you know?
That is
And
really
just
cool.
and I love introducing someone to wine that is interested but hasn't really gotten into it, and then they get hooked. Like I love that feeling to be able to spark
Yeah.
someone on it. Then they feel like, oh, you know what, maybe I do want to check this out again. And I actually think that, to your point, it's not so doom and gloom on the younger generations, because I think the younger generations, they do have a thirst for learning. They have a thirst for having experiences. And the more and more AI comes into play and things are digital, those real world experiences are actually going to become even more important to people. And so I think our younger generations are going to swing us back into a world where having wine as a part of your daily life and your table is important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Marcel and I were talking about that. He was saying the same thing, that people are going to want stuff made by other people's hands.
Yes.
The more that we see so much is not made that way.
100%.
Yeah, I was thinking, oh my God, could a robot come into the winery and just make the wine? And wouldn't that be great in some ways and also awful in other ways? Like maybe Peter's knees wouldn't be so destroyed and his ankles and everything from pushing.
You just need the robot to lift things. Really, but...
Yeah, that's a forklift, I guess. A forklift, exactly. I guess, is a kind of robot.
Smart forklift. Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah, so okay, so you're charging us $3,200 a ton. Let's say you get, I don't know what your average tonnage is, 3-4 tons an acre. Do you know?
3 to 4, depending on the year. Yeah.
So you're losing money. How did you decide on that price point? Was that, you have a vineyard manager, Ryan Carr. Was Ryan setting the price based on what other people in the valley were charging?
Yeah, it was just based on assessing the rest of the valley and
Okay.
make sure we were in line with the rest of the valley. Yeah. And so obviously there's certain vineyards that have been established in there for years that command a higher price point than that. But I didn't mind being on the lower end of the range anyway, because we're new. Some of our vines are younger. Obviously, the vines you guys get grapes from are one of the older vines, so they're obviously more established and more complex in flavor, and can withstand any of the different heat experiences throughout the year. But generally, I felt like it was important in the beginning to make relationships and to get our name out there and establish that we stand for quality, we stand for hand farmed, and that we really care about the quality of the grapes. It's not necessarily about the money, it's about the quality, and that we want to make sure that what we're putting out there or what we're selling is quality. And so the vineyard crew does tons of passes to drop fruit. Like when we harvest, we drop fruit in the vineyard at harvest, and I'm there every year at harvest, clipping grapes along with the team. I'm seeing what the team leaves. Everyone's leaving anything on the ground that is not spotless. We want to make sure that what's picked is the stuff that's spotless, and so you get it into the winery. You don't even really have to sort because it's been sorted.
Yeah, we definitely have that experience. And so there's only 3 of us making wine from your vineyard, right? Us, Ryan, and you guys. Is that it?
And then Crosshatch is taking our Viognier. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then each year. For the Viognier, yeah. And then each year we'll have buyers come in and out depending on what they need. So Babcock bought some of our grapes one year. Who else? Sonia. She has a couple different labels, bought some of our grapes one year. So yeah, it just depends on the year, like who needs something.
Does Ryan broker those deals for you?
Yeah, usually he'll say, hey, if so-and-so might be interested, if you guys interested. And he'll usually check with us to see if it's something we want to keep back for ourselves or if, we're good to sell some of it. And I like to, because I want people to have a chance to know the vineyard's there and who we are,
Yeah, it is interesting to have someone else make wine from the same place you're making it from, and then to taste the differences, because I think we talk about terroir and how important that is, and sure, it's not that it isn't, but it's just that sometimes people can make wine from the same exact grapes picked on the same exact day in drastically different ways, and it's instructive anyway.
I know it is, especially for us, because we also want to kind of dial into what our style is that we want to achieve with our grapes, and we have an idea of what that should be, but we don't have enough years of making it to really have had the time to dial in that style. Right. And so for us, it's super informative to be able to go taste different winemakers' versions with our grapes, because then we can say, oh, I like that direction. What did they do? So that we can kind of help hone ourselves in and almost not shortcut, because you can't really shortcut, but at least give ourselves some learning faster than we would have on our own. And you just don't know what each grape, each block's going to give you something different from each vineyard, right? That Grenache that you guys take, it's crazy how it holds its acidity. It could go up to high
It's
Brix
got
and
tannin
still,
and acid, and it's so weird because I always think of Grenache as kind of being the Pinot Grigio of grapes. It's kind of like medium everything across the board, except alcohol, where it tends to be high, and ours
right.
isn't. It's like the alcohol's 13.5, that it has plenty of structure. I always tell people that the Grenache like builds a little house in your mouth as
Oh yeah, I love
you're
that.
drinking it. Yeah, it's kind of very, it's like building a little structure.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Whereas like we had planted a bunch of head trained Grenache around the kind of around the barn where there's more pavement, and so
Yeah.
heat reflects a little bit. And like this past year, the heat just spiked really quickly, if you recall, and we lost all that fruit. Like all that fruit just it went over so fast. Plus, it's younger, so it got affected, and so we didn't harvest it. We dropped it all on the ground, which
Ah,
also sucks.
Sarah,
Yeah. But I
that's
don't want to like make any.
heartbreaking.
I know, but I don't want to make crap out of it. So I'm like, you know what? Just drop it on the ground. So like, write it off. Fun.
Write it off. Whenever somebody
Not
goes,
really.
it's a write off, and it's like if I still lost the money, like I don't actually know,
Exactly.
like
No, yeah, exactly. That was more figuratively than
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, write it off than actual like an actual write off with the
actual write
IRS,
off. No,
right?
yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do you have wine in bottle yet?
So we
You
do have wine
do.
bottle. We do. Yes.
I know you were working on your label. Is anything labeled yet?
Yes. So we have wine and bottle 2023 vintage, labeled, ready to go. Been ready to go since last March, waiting on permitting for a number of reasons to be able to actually sell it. And then we're about to label, is this right? No, sorry, 2022 vintage and bottle, 2023 vintage, we're about to label this March. Yeah, so we'll have like, unfortunately now stacked up two vintages in boxes.
Yeah, but how much wine is that overall?
At least it's not too much. So like the 2022 vintage, we made maybe 200 cases, so it's very
Yeah.
small. And then 2023 was more like 300 to 400, something like that. So it's not huge, at least. Thankfully, God, like that was at least a good decision of ours. So okay, we're just gonna step our toe in, and then we'll slowly increase the quantity each year. Thank God we did that since the two vintages stacked up. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
once what you're going to need when you open, if you can have tasting experiences at the estate, let's say, you're going to need various wines. And I think some people are going to love to taste. We get this question all the time. They want to taste back vintages.
that's true.
Like
That's a really great point.
our current release is 2022. So it's not like you're backed up, by the way.
Right. No, that's
Yeah.
totally true. And time in bottle is fine, obviously. So that doesn't matter either. Yeah. And one of our thoughts when we had a ability to have a broader lineup and have more cases, which now that we've got two vintages stacked up, we can start to do this a little bit, is ultimately what we wanted to do was make specific clone bottlings of each of our varietals as well as blends, so that we could literally taste someone on, this is Grenache 362 clone, and this is Grenache 515 clone, same vineyard, same winemaking process, taste the two different clones, because they actually taste incredibly different from each other. Super cool. And then you could taste them on a blend of, and here's these two clones blended into, 100% Grenache. And then, oh, by the way, taste our Mourvèdre and taste our Syrah, and here's a GSM. And so that way we could actually start to spark that interest of people of like, God, this is so cool to be able to taste it individually and then taste it blended. And so ultimately, even once we're at our, full case production off our property, we still want to make small lots so that we can do this kind of individual bottling and have a broader suite of lineup to be able to taste people on.
Yeah,
But
I
at least
love it.
I'll be able to do some of that because of the two vintages stacked up.
Yeah, and people are fascinated by that. One of the things that I've been wanting to do is to create an experience in the winery. Nobody wants to come to Lompoc. I'm aware of that. But should anybody want to come to Lompoc, is for us to pull barrel samples and for people to create their own blend and bottle it. It's kind of a logistical nightmare, but I just think I think it's really fun for people to understand what that experience of blending is when you're tasting different clones, different barrels, different harvest dates. The wines can taste really, really different, even though they're so similar.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that's back to like the younger generations. They're going to want experiences like that. And so I really think that's going to resonate. Even I think people will come to Lompoc.
Let's hope. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly.
So is your plan with the wine to sell 100% DTC, or do you want to have some wholesale distribution? And what's your price point going to be for the different wines?
Yeah, so I think we'll be mostly DTC, partly because in my other career, my other job, selling things direct to consumer has been what I've been doing for a number of years. And so it's just more comfortable for me. I'm selling video instead of wine, but it's, more in my wheelhouse. Also, going through a distributor, you're eating into your margins, and we already talked about margins being incredibly low. So there's that. And then lastly, I don't think our volumes are ever going to be high enough given our property's 10 acres and we'll probably have like 6 acres planted. And so I don't think our volumes are going to be high enough of any one given wine to really have broad distribution. But I would like to try and start to get on like select restaurant lists, more so for visibility and trying to get our name out there than anything else.
Yeah, the local business for restaurants in particular, getting something by the glass absolutely drives traffic to your tasting room. I was talking to Nick Lewis. He's like one of the tasting room managers at Dragonette. And his feeling is that you should take a loss on a restaurant by the glass placement at Maddie's Tavern, at Nella, at SY Kitchen. It's a marketing cost, and driving people to the tasting room then makes them buy 6 bottles is worth you losing $3 a bottle by having it by the glass somewhere. Yeah. I still struggle with people telling me that I should lose money in order to make money. Like, I'm so sick of that model.
You're like, I've been doing that model for years.
I've been doing it long time. Like we did our costs the other day. And when we do cost of goods, we're actually adding rent, salary, everything into it, even though I know that's like a little inflated cost of goods, but we still have to be able to pay ourselves. And so, and we still have to pay rent. So we were just looking at Bolus. It costs us with everything included $28 to make that bottle. And we're selling it wholesale for $26. So that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But you're selling it DTC for $40. So you're making it, that's where Nick is in the back of my head saying, no, you should have it wholesale because it'll drive people to the tasting room. But who knows?
Got it. Yeah. Well, and like how many cases do you normally end up giving to any one of those restaurants when you're doing the marketing placement?
10 if they,
10,
we have a Roussan placement at Maddie's Tavern right now, and they might go through 2 cases. Oh my God, a month? It is not that often. And they're not going to keep it on there for more than 6 months because they want their list to be dynamic and changing. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to your point, that makes a lot of sense. It's like you're not losing that much money by getting that placement.
As long as it's a small amount like
small
that,
amount.
That seems tenable. Yeah. And you would use that at an event pouring somewhere if you were going to an event to pour too. Case or 2, whatever, 3, depending on the event.
I hate doing those, but
too.
And we started doing, I just did some sales in LA last week, and I don't know, I sold 15 cases of wine between 2 accounts, and I just am like, well, I'm going to come down next week and deliver these on my own to save myself $20 a case in shipping.
Oh,
so
totally.
It's like trying to save all of this money. But I mean, I think what bums me out is like, we're at this point where I'm trying to save $20 a case for shipping, but I am, because it all adds up so much.
Does add up. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about when we launch our wine club offering, but I'd have to do it like on the DL so that it's not super unwieldy, but offering to hand deliver to club members in LA simply to save on shipping, and so that my club members don't have to pay for shipping. Because unfortunately, Amazon has trained everybody that shipping should be free. And it's like, well,
and shipping is not
it's like
free.
A case is the best rates I've heard from people who have large amounts that can negotiate good rates is like $50 a case. And that's like a good rate for a case, right?
But our prices on FedEx have gone up a ton. For wholesale to ship GLS or, whatever other terrible delivery service we use, somewhere between $15 to $20 a case, depending on how many cases that you ship. So all of those dollars adds up in the end, for sure.
It does add up. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I was going to ask you, I don't want to keep you on here forever.
Oh, I'm good.
Like in terms of personal sacrifices that you feel like that you've had to make, can you talk about that a little? I'm trying to think about this in terms of like Peter and I run a business together. You and Sky are running a business together, but you also have separate day jobs. So when you come together at night, I will just say from personal experience, when Peter and I come together at night, one of the personal sacrifices that's made from us doing this and working together is that a lot of our free time together is spent talking about the business. And sometimes I feel like that gets in the way of just being able to be married, like normal married people, to sit down and not talk about business at night. So I guess I would consider that a personal sacrifice that we have made. Not that it makes the marriage, it's not bad marriage, it's just a different marriage. Something where I've had to say, hey, it's 7:30, maybe we stop talking about work.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely do talk about the wine business a lot, on our time together and or like our weekends. We end up spending either up at the vineyard taking care of work for the vineyard or,
Yeah.
some of our free time working on, the label and getting our website up and running and, our actual label printer work to make sure that the color is right on the label and, whatever it might be. So we do end up spending a lot of personal time on that. I think at least it's different than our day-to-day work
Yeah.
jobs. So it's like, it's not the same topic where, we're on 24/7. Whereas I think with you guys, you're like on the same topic 24/7. So I could absolutely see how that would get, you're like, let's just stop.
Yeah, sometimes it's just like, can we not talk about the business
yeah,
right now? Because especially when you're when you're really profitable, you're like, let's talk about how much money we made today in the tasting
Right.
room. But when you're like, oh shoot, it rained for a week and we had 3 0 days, you get to the end of the week, everybody's in a bad mood. And it's like, you just have to decide it cannot take over your life. You can't let it take over your life.
Yeah, it's so true. I do worry about that once we do start selling and we need to be out there more selling, that's going to end up growing that time that we need to spend and lessening free time otherwise. So I do worry about how that balance is going to strike because it's going to be hard. It's going to be a real uphill mountain to build up a customer base and start selling it. We're definitely cognizant of that.
Well, I think it's about, though, being a part of the community. I think what you do is you start with having like an industry, and I don't need to give you advice right now, but you start with having like an industry event, and if you can get industry behind you, I would say that Peter and I have almost inarguably the worst location for a tasting room space in Los Olivos. It is hidden behind a cafe at the very east side of town. Like Blair is down there, but you can see his building, right? You can't see us. And the way that we stay afloat is by recommendations, and you guys will get those because people like you. And I think if people want you to be successful, then they will send people to you. But yeah, then somebody has to be there every weekend because you have to have consistent hours.
Totally. Although right now we are not able to do tastings on our property. We'll see how that shakes out.
Okay.
But I know. Well, but that's a hindrance, right? So we have to, figure out like where the best places that we can actually start to taste people on the wines. Yeah. So we talked about at least like maybe in the meantime we'd do something down in LA. I don't know, to try to attract, some of the crowd that's here.
Yeah, we're going to, for the first time, do a wine club release at the LA house this year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just for people, just like you're saying, for people who live there to be able to come and pick up their shipment so that they can save on shipping. Like you guys, people could easily come to your home. Totally. You would have a little party, do a wine club pickup event.
Yeah, so that's what we're thinking. Maybe we'll do that in the interim. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about money, the business, but I guess my last question is like, do you guys ever consider just you're going to sell the property and be done with it? Or has it been, despite all the challenges, a really great experience that you wouldn't, trade for anything?
We had some bumps in the road this past year that really made us question at one point whether we should do that. And then, we kind of get our feet under us and we get sparked by some inspiration again and get back on track. And ultimately, we started this whole thing, or we wanted to start this whole thing with Sky's dad. It was meant to be a family endeavor that we could create for our future generations of our family. So even though he passed, like the vineyard's in essence a tribute to him, and that's why we called it Lyons Vineyard after Sky's dad, Stephen Lyons. He kind of still sparks our passion, and so we want to keep going. We also talk about our son. Is Wilder going to be like, not business, not for me. See you guys later. I'm moving to Europe. And then we're like, oh, shoot, maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. I'm like, we'll let him go. And then maybe he'll on his own want to come back again one day. But yeah.
Yeah. And then he'll be a second generation farmer. And how cool would that be?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. And I, again, feel like just with the way our society's going and how digital things are getting, having a tie to the land and really appreciating where your food and your wine comes from and having a connection to that, I think it's super important. It keeps us grounded. So I feel like that's important to hang on to.
Yeah, I totally agree. Did we miss anything?
I'm trying to think.
If we didn't, that's okay. And we can always come back.
Was it interesting enough?
It doesn't, you know what? To me, it only matters if it's interesting to us.
Anybody?
You can't make wine for other people. You can't create for other people. This is like, I feel this so more strongly today than I ever have. There's so much noise out in the world with everybody creating everything. And I almost feel like I don't have any business putting stuff out there in the world. And then I'm like, fuck that. I have all the business in the world.
True.
It's like,
of course you do.
You know, we create what we want to. And then if we're the only people that listens to it, it's at least like a little bit of, posterity.